Robert Chan clutched his weathered leather wallet as he walked into Luxury Motors, his shoes clicking against the polished marble floor. At 72, he carried himself with quiet dignity. Despite his modest appearance in a faded cardigan and a well-worn blue sweater, an old gift from his late wife, Margaret, the gleaming new cars around him looked like silent sentinels. Robert had spent 2 long years saving for this moment. After driving the same Toyota Corolla for 20 years, he was finally ready to buy his dream car, a brand-new Mercedes-Benz S-Class. The $120,000 in his savings account represented countless careful decisions and delayed gratifications. "Can I help you?" A young salesman in an expensive suit approached him, his name tag reading Blake. While the smile on Blake's face was friendly, it didn't reach his eyes as he looked Robert up and down, clearly unimpressed. "Yes, I'm interested in the S-Class," Robert said, pointing to the silver sedan that had caught his eye. Blake snickered, exchanging glances with another salesman nearby. "Sir, this is the Mercedes-Benz S-Class. It starts at $110,000. Perhaps I can show you something more suitable? We have some nice used Toyotas." Robert felt his cheeks burn. "I'm aware of the price. I would like to test drive it, please." "Listen, sir," Blake said, the condescension dripping from his voice. "We don't do test drives without proof of funds. We can't risk wasting time with window shoppers." By now, several other employees had gathered, poorly concealing their amusement. The sales manager, Derek Thompson, approached with a smirk. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, though his tone suggested he'd already decided Robert was the problem. "I have the money," Robert said quietly, reaching for his bank statements. His hands trembled slightly, not from age but from humiliation. "Sir, this is a luxury car dealership," Thompson announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "We serve a certain caliber of client. I'm going to have to ask you to leave before you make our actual customers uncomfortable." Robert stood there, the bank statements crumpling in his fist as snickers echoed through the showroom. His eyes burned with unshed tears. He thought of Margaret. She would have squeezed his hand and told him to hold his head high. "Very well," he said softly, turning to leave. At the door, he paused and looked back. "You know, my wife always said that character reveals itself in how you treat those you think can't benefit you." That night, Robert sat in his study, surrounded by framed photographs and memories. Instead of his usual evening tea, he was on the phone with his son, Michael, a successful investment banker in New York. "Did they really treat you that way?" Michael's voice crackled with anger over the speaker. "It's fine, son. I'll just try another dealership," Robert sighed. "No, Dad. It's not fine. You work too hard to be treated like that." There was a pause, followed by the sound of typing. "Did you know Luxury Motors is actually struggling? Their parent company, Automax Corp., is trying to sell them. Sales have been dropping for years because of their terrible customer service." Robert sat up straighter, an idea forming. "Tell me more." "Automax Corp. is trying to sell the dealership for $5 million, Michael continued. "That's actually undervalued considering their inventory and real estate." Robert nodded, even though his son couldn't see him. Those shares he invested in when Margaret had trusted his decision, back when the company was small, had been worth $50,000 then. Now, nearly his entire savings, those shares were worth over $8 million. "Son, are you thinking what I'm thinking?" "I'll make some calls tonight," Michael said, excitement creeping into his voice. "We can have the paperwork ready tomorrow." The next morning, Robert put on his best suit, the one he had worn to Margaret's funeral. He styled his silver hair neatly and picked up his old briefcase. This time, when he walked into Luxury Motors, his steps echoed with purpose. Blake was the first to notice him. "Sir, I thought we made it clear yesterday." "Good morning," Robert interrupted politely. "I'm here to see Derek Thompson." Blake hesitated. "He doesn't have time for—" "Oh, I think he'll make time," Robert said, his voice firm but calm. "Tell him Robert Chan is here." A mixture of confusion and dread spread across Blake's face. Behind him, other employees stopped what they were doing, whispers spreading across the showroom floor. Thompson burst out of his office, disbelief etched across his features. "What is this nonsense? Robert opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. These are the ownership transfer documents signed this morning. Automax Corp was quite happy to accept my offer. He turned to address the gathered staff. As my first act as owner, I'm afraid I'll have to make some personnel changes. The showroom fell silent. Mr. Thompson, Mr. Blake, and anyone else who participated in yesterday's entertainment, you have until the end of the day to clear out your desks. Blake stepped forward, stuttering, "Sir, please, I have a family." "So do many of the people you have likely humiliated over the years," Robert replied calmly. "I suggest you remember that in your next position." As the dismissed employees gathered their belongings, Robert turned to the remaining staff. "For those staying, we're going to make some changes. Every customer who walks through that door will be treated with respect, regardless of their appearance or assumed wealth. We'll implement new training programs and a mystery shopper system to ensure this happens." He walked over to the silver S-Class he'd admired yesterday. "And this will be my first purchase as its owner. I trust that won't be a problem." Later that afternoon, as Robert sat behind the wheel of his new Mercedes, he breathed in the sweet scent of leather and success. He placed Margaret's photo on the dashboard and smiled. "You were right, my love," he whispered. "Character does reveal itself, and sometimes justice comes in unexpected ways." Over the next year, luxury motors flourished under Robert's leadership. Sales increased as word spread about their exceptional customer service. Robert implemented a program to help seniors navigate car purchases and established a scholarship fund for underprivileged youth interested in automotive careers. The replacements for Blake and Thompson were chosen specifically for their dedication to treating all customers with dignity. Robert made sure that every employee understood success wasn't just measured in sales figures but in the respect and kindness shown to each person who walked through their doors. One day, almost a year after the incident, an elderly woman in shabby clothes walked into the dealership. The new sales team welcomed her warmly, taking the time to show her every car she was interested in. She turned out to be a wealthy widow looking to buy 3 cars for her grandchildren's college graduation. As Robert watched the sale unfold from his office, he smiled, thinking of how different things were now. His phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Proud of you, Dad. Mom would be too." Robert glanced at Margaret's photo. The dealership's success was sweet, but the real victory lay in the culture he had helped create. Every time he saw a customer leave with a smile, he knew he had turned a moment of humiliation into something meaningful. That evening, as Robert drove home in his S-Class, he noticed a familiar black sedan carefully following him. His stomach dropped. It was the same car he had seen earlier. Was it a coincidence? As he turned onto his street, the sedan kept pace, creeping closer. Fear gripped him. Were Blake and Thompson still harboring resentment, or had the Salvetti crime family, rumored to be lurking in the shadows behind luxury motors, come after him? Robert's heart raced as he quickly parked in his driveway, leaping from the car and rushing into his home. He locked the door behind him and reached for his phone, contemplating calling the police but hesitating. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps he was overreacting. But just as he picked up the phone, he heard a loud knock at the door. His heart jumped in his chest. "Mr. Chen, it's Blake," came a muffled voice from outside. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent." "Go away," Robert shouted back, nerves on edge. His mind raced as he remembered his newfound responsibilities. The employees and customers depended on him. He couldn't let paranoia cloud his judgment, nor could he disregard a potential threat. Steeling himself and fueled by determination, Robert opened the door a crack. "What do you want?" Blake stood there, a mix of desperation and fear in his eyes. "You need to listen to me. I know things you'll want to hear." "What things?" Robert asked. "I've caught wind of some dangerous dealings surrounding our dealership. The Salvetti family, they're not happy with the changes you've made. They want revenge, and they think you're a threat." Robert's heart pounded as he processed the warning. "If they think I'm a threat, they're right. I won't back down. I stood up against them before, and I will do it again." "Listen," Blake urged, looking over his shoulder as if expecting someone to come around the corner. "I know I messed up before, but I'm trying to make things right. We need to work together. Otherwise, we could both end up in real trouble," With the tension growing thicker than ever, Robert considered Blake's words. Though he had once despised the young salesman, now he felt an unexpected sense of camaraderie. "Come inside," Robert said reluctantly, curiosity piqued. "Let's talk." As they settled in the living room, Blake laid out what he'd learned. The Salvetti family has ties to several criminal organizations, and they're not above using intimidation tactics to get what they want. They might be planning something against you, possibly something violent. Robert's confidence grew with every word Blake spoke. He had faced humiliation before. This was just another challenge to overcome. "What's your plan?" Robert asked, his voice steady. "I've reached out to some connections who can help us dig deeper. If we uncover their next steps, we can protect ourselves and the people at Luxury Motors," Blake said, determination flickering in his eyes. He shared his plan, involving both the police and the community to catch the Salvetti family red-handed, but first, they needed evidence. They would gather intel to expose the criminal acts, turning the tables on the very people who had once belittled Robert. Robert agreed to the plan, feeling the responsibility of his position weighing heavily on his shoulders. They called Michael in New York, who offered to provide additional resources and contacts in law enforcement. When Blake and Robert presented their findings to the local police, the officers took them seriously. They organized a sting operation in collaboration with other dealerships in the area who had also been targeted by the Salvetti crime family. Days passed, and the tension was palpable. Was the Salvetti family onto their plan? Would they retaliate before the sting operation could be executed? Just as it seemed like the fear would consume them all, the time finally came. Robert watched as his staff prepared for hidden cameras, ready to document any suspicious activity. The dealership remained open for business as usual, striving to maintain the atmosphere of safety and respect Robert had implemented. Customers continued to come and share their experiences, both good and bad. At the same time, Blake and Robert stayed vigilant, keeping an eye out for any members of the Salvetti family or their associates. Their partnership slowly transformed into genuine respect as they worked together toward a common goal. One fateful evening, as the sun set and darkness crept in, the sting operation was set into motion. Officers positioned themselves discreetly around Luxury Motors, ready to pounce if the Salvetti family made an appearance. Then it happened. A group of men in expensive suits entered the dealership, eyes scanning the interior with a predatory gaze. Robert's stomach dropped. There was Rex Salvetti himself. "Get ready," he whispered to Blake, heart racing. The moments felt like hours as the police waited for the right time. Finally, as Rex approached the front desk, the officers sprung into action, rushing in from all sides. The surprise attack caught the men off guard. Robert's heart raced as chaos erupted around them. Officers shouted commands, handcuffs clinked, and the Salvetti family members were quickly subdued. "Do you think he's finally going to learn?" Robert heard someone murmur. He felt a sense of justice wash over him. Every moment of humiliation and indignity faced could finally lead to something meaningful. They had turned the tide. As the officers led Rex and his men away, Robert and Blake exchanged a look of victory. They had done it. The threats that once loomed large felt far less powerful now. Months later, Robert looked back on the entire journey with disbelief. He had confronted his fears, turned humiliation into strength, and taken bold steps to ensure justice prevailed. But now, he had also ensured a better future for his community. The success of Luxury Motors soared, and alongside it, the stories of unity, respect, and perseverance flourished. As he watched the dealership thrive, Robert knew it was more than just a business. In memory of Margaret and her wisdom, Robert hung her framed quote prominently in the showroom. "Character reveals itself in how you treat those you think can't benefit you." People would ask him about it, and he would smile and share the story of how a moment of humiliation had been transformed into something more valuable. A sanctuary where everyone, regardless of their appearance or background, would be treated with dignity and respect. And every day, he drove his beloved S-Class, not just as a sign of success but as a reminder of the journey he had taken and those who had joined him along the way. He hoped that every car salesman who walked through his doors would remember that character counts, that respect matters, and above all, that every moment is an opportunity to make a difference. As Robert drove home each evening, he reflected on how life had come full circle. He always took the long way home, a little extra time under the setting sun. In doing so, he remembered each lesson, each struggle, and the unexpected journey that brought both justice and newfound purpose to his life.